Today we're going to talk about how to use MyFitnessPal, whether for fat loss, maintenance or muscle gain. If you have a look at the screen now, we'll go through all of these different things today so that you've got a better idea of why you should be using MyFitnessPal, if you should be, and essentially how to get the most out of it. MyFitnessPal is essentially an app that you can use to keep a food diary. So why would we want to keep a food diary in the first place? Well, knowing how much you're eating is very helpful. If you know how much you're eating, then we can adjust it one way or another to make sure you're heading towards the goals that you want. So you could raise your food if you're trying to gain weight, or lower the amount of food if you're trying to lose weight. And if you try and do that without a record of how much you're eating, how will you know whether you need to raise or lose your food? So the other thing we can do is we can use it to plan food in a more accurate way. So if we know, for example, what our meal structure looks like through the day and how much of different protein, carbs, fat, fruits, veggies, stuff like that we're going to eat, it makes it a bit easier instead of sort of guessing and thinking, oh, maybe I should eat this, maybe I shouldn't. It lets you have a clear yes or no. Yes, you should be eating it. No, you shouldn't. And then with that, we then know whether we're eating the right stuff for us or the wrong stuff. So if you find that every time you eat a certain meal, you end up with a bloated stomach, if you've got a log of that somewhere, you can look back and say, right, it's this food, so maybe you don't have that food so much in the future. Or if you find the other way of you eat something specifically and then you feel fantastic, maybe you'll eat more of that food. But if we don't track it somehow, then we won't know where we're going from. And then finally, longer term, if you start tracking what's in your food, you learn what's in different meals. So a lot of people, if you say what foods are high in protein, some people will know what foods, but some people will say things like peanut butter, which, whilst peanut butter does have some protein in, is more of a source of fat. But the more you track and the more you get an idea of what's in different foods, the more you'll understand these foods longer term. So then eventually you won't need to track to get the same results, because you'll just know, you're like the Matrix. You can just look at a food and be like, that's roughly this much fat, this much protein, this much fiber, and so on. So if we keep a diary, we get an idea of what's in different foods, and we can use that to our advantage over the longer term. The main thing that we want to get out of from using a food diary like MyFitnessPal is to be able to control our portions. So the things specifically that we care the most about are calorie intake and protein intake. So counting your calories and protein are essentially the fastest way to make sure you're putting into your body what it needs towards whatever your goal is. If you just sort of ate healthily, for most people, that would be good enough. But if you're in a position where you find you need to lose weight or gain weight, or you have more strict goals, actually counting the specific thing that's in foods is just a faster, more efficient way to get there. So you've got things like Slimming World and Weight Watchers where they use like a point system. So this food might be worth this many points, this is this many, this is that. It's along the right lines. It's a good idea of portion counting in some way, but rather than having to learn a different system, we think it's better to just learn exactly what's in the food, and then you don't need to learn what's in the system and then how it fits into the system. You can just be like, chicken is this many calories, this much protein. That's not going to change. Whereas if a point system changes, if something gets changed from a good food to a bad food or something, then you're left sort of out of the know, like you don't know whether this is okay or not okay. So we use it so we have an accurate idea of everything that's in it. So we can track daily and weekly, more importantly, how much protein you have, how many carbohydrates, fat, the total calorie intake, how much alcohol, and various different vitamins and minerals. So I wouldn't worry too much about the vitamins and minerals at this point, but for example, someone might need more potassium in their diet. If we've got this log, we can look and see how much you're having from what foods. Hopefully that's convinced you a little bit about why we should track our food. So to make the most progress, we need to know what exactly we're eating and then how much of it. You can use a pen and paper to do it, but it's a bit laborsome and you'd have to do a lot of maths yourself. There are lots of different apps that you can use, but we've found that MyFitnessPal is the easiest one to use over the longer time. And the great thing is it's a free app, so you can pay for a premium version. We personally don't recommend it. You don't need it. It just lets you use a few extra features on it. Some people might enjoy it, some won't, but the free version works perfectly well. Now, if you're just maintaining and you're not looking to specifically gain or lose weight, then I wouldn't worry about tracking your food as long as you're eating mostly healthy. So a portion of protein, plenty of fruit, plenty of veg, eat until just before you're full. That's enough for most people. It's just not very efficient. So that might get you to your goals, or it might not. It's like setting off on a drive, but you don't really know where you're going and you haven't looked at the maps and you're not looking at the signs. Whereas if we use an app like MyFitnessPal, it's like we've got a sat nav, so we know exactly where we're going. We can work out, when you start getting to the details, you can work out exactly how long it takes. So for example, the spreadsheets, the trackers that we use with you guys, with mine, it's a case of numbers. I put in these numbers over this amount of time and this is what will happen with my body. So that's where we want you to get to over time, but first things first is getting to grips with the app. So who should be actually using it? Like I said, if you're looking to improve your body composition, gaining or losing weight, if you're wanting to improve sports performance as well, like you might be someone who's a long distance cyclist who needs more fat and less carbs, or might be the opposite, you might need more carbs and less fat. If you don't track, then we don't know where you're at. If you want to use it as well to learn about food, it's a really, really good exercise essentially to just track your food for a year. And I know that sounds like a long period of time, but by the end of a year, you will know for definite what's in food. You won't have to check on the app anymore. It will be, like I say, like the Matrix. You'll see food and this is what's in it. So it's a really good way of getting to grips of what's in specific foods and sort of what the right portion sizes are for you, because obviously that's going to be different for everybody. Now, there are some people who probably shouldn't use MyFitnessPal. So people with specific medical conditions, say you've got some kind of kidney disease, you need very, very specific nutrition plans. If that's you, we'll speak separately and essentially don't worry about MyFitnessPal. If you have any food-related mental health issues, anorexia, orthorexia, anything like that, then MyFitnessPal is maybe not the best way to go. If you're unsure, speak to your doctor first. Yes, I am a doctor, but I'm not your doctor. So for most people, MyFitnessPal is a great thing to use. If you're not sure, just double check first. So try to break this down into some steps so that you know what you should do now and what you will do over time. So the first few steps are the things you can do right now, as in like within the next couple of weeks. And then there's the stuff longer term that's actually going to make you go towards your actual goals. And then there's even longer term, essentially how we stop using it. So first thing we're going to do is download the app, or you can use the website. You're going to make an account, ignore the preset goals. You're going to change the meal names if you want to and start tracking today, like right now. So what I'll do, I'll talk you through it. As we're doing it, I want you to, if you're watching this on your phone, use your computer to do MyFitnessPal, and vice versa. If you're on your computer, use your phone. You can download it onto iPads, iPhones, Androids, whatever. And then we're going to talk about, once you're tracking, how to actually change what you're having to get towards your goals. Then a bit more about understanding it, and then eventually how you're going to stop tracking. So let's go through this. Right, to download the app. You've got access to this presentation below this video. So if you want to click on it, you can click on the links directly, but it's dead simple. So what you can do is, if you've got an iPhone, go onto the App Store, type in MyFitnessPal. It's a blue icon. Basically click on it, click free, and then download it. If you have an Android phone, you do the exact same thing, but on the Google Play Store. And then if you're on desktop, so on an actual computer, just type in myfitnesspal.com. Now, at the time of me recording it, these are all the steps that it wants you to go through. I'd imagine it'll be quite similar over time. Some of it might be just slightly different. So first thing, you need to click sign up for free. If you've used it in the past, you might already have some kind of login. So it either wants you to use your email or one of the other options, log in with Google or Facebook or something like that. And then it will ask you whatever your goal is. These steps are kind of irrelevant. You can ignore them if you want, because we're going to give you specific targets anyway, but it's going to ask you what your goal is. How active are you? If you want to put in the details, the way that I would categorize the different ones is based on how many steps a day you're doing. So not very active would be less than 5,000 steps a day, lightly active between 5 and 7,000, active 7 to 10,000, and very active 10,000 plus. If you're not sure which one of the categories you're in, probably click lightly active, and then it'll ask you for your sex, date of birth, address, height, weight, and so on. You don't have to put in your specific details if you don't want to give them to the app, if you like. And then it will ask you about what goal of weight loss or weight gain you want. You could set it to 0.5 kilos a week, for example. And then finally, you're going to need to pop in password and your username. Now, You can add friends on this, so if you do, it's worth putting your name, so we'll recognize it if you send us one of the requests for us to have a look. MyFitnessPal will give you some goals based on what it thinks is right for you. From experience, I would just ignore them. So we're going to give you the specific targets that you're going to aim for. MyFitnessPal is good, but broad scale. It doesn't take into account all the different factors of your life. In the free version, it rounds the macros, the protein, carbohydrates, and fat to percentages. So again, I would just ignore them. My preference is to set the target calories to 0, and then you just work up from there on a daily basis. If you get the premium version, you can be very accurate about what your targets are. You can set different targets for each day, but to be honest, I think that's overkill. And at this point, we just want to get using the app and tracking food. So the next step is to change the meal names. This is completely optional and you definitely don't need to do it. I just find it helps me to be a bit more accurate when I'm using the app. So if you click on the More button, then Settings, Diary Settings, and finally Customize Meal Names. So I would suggest that you add an extra meal called Extras, and also I would suggest putting rough times for when your meals are or any reminders that you need. So when you have a look on the app, initially, I think it says breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. Not everyone eats at those specific meal times or even those meals. So I would change it to whatever your normal daily schedule looks like. So for example, for me at the minute, I have it set. So I've written 8 o'clock, meal 1, 13 at 1 o'clock, meal 2, 3 o'clock, training snack, 6 o'clock, meal 3, and 9 o'clock, meal 4. And then I've added the extras because most of the time, my meals during the day are pretty similar, and then extras is if I have something completely out of the ordinary or it doesn't fit in with one of the meals. But you can set it to whatever your schedule is. So we've got some other examples here. Say you don't start eating till later in the day, you might eat at 12, 5 and 9, and you might put a little reminder in to have some veggies. Or you might only have 2 meals a day. Generally speaking, we want between 2 and 6 meals a day. Anything less than that, like 1 meal is not going to be ideal, and anything more than that, you're going to be constantly eating, and the meals are going to be pretty tiny, really. You could put, for example, in the extras, alcohol only on the weekend, or you could put meal 1, a shake, just to prompt you so that you know what that meal should roughly be for you, so it's one less thing to think about on a daily basis. Like I say, I really like having the time on them because then I know roughly when I'm going to eat each specific meal, but this is completely optional. Something you can do is just track all of your food in one meal. I find it makes some of the later steps a little bit faffy when it comes time for copying meals, and some of the a little bit more advanced stuff we'll talk about later. So we've got it set up now, time to finally use it. I want you to do this whilst I'm talking you through it. So you're going to go onto the app. On whichever meal it is, you're going to click Add Food. Now on there, you'll see there's a little thing that says Recent. So what it'll do is it'll store your most recent foods. Now, that makes it very, very easy to track things that you eat regularly. You'll find we're mostly creatures of habit, so you can quickly select the food you've recently had. So you're going to click Add Food. If you've not had it recently, you'll have to type in the name of the food, and then there'll be a search option. The other thing you can do is press Scan Barcode and then scan the packet of whatever it is. Now from there, you'll need to change the quantity to whatever the quantity of the food is that you had. Just a few things to note here. 1, when it comes to any food that you cook, weigh it raw. Always weigh it raw and use that data. Another thing is just double check the packet of something and MyFitnessPal to make sure it's the same thing that comes up. So one of the strengths of MyFitnessPal is that it's user entered data, so it means you can find almost any food. But one of the downsides is it's user entered data, so it's not always 100% accurate. But as long as it's consistent and you're fairly accurate, that'll be fine. So for example, if you scan a bag of crisps and it says on the packet that it's 300 calories for 5 packs or something, but on MyFitnessPal it says it's 50 calories, it's probably not the best thing to track because it's such a discrepancy. And we'll talk later about adding specific foods, but I try and make sure it's quite accurate to the actual food that you're eating. If you're not sure of anything, let us know and we'll help you go through it. So that's basically what the tracking is. Now you just need to repeat that with everything that goes in your mouth, everything that you eat, food and drinks. I wouldn't bother about tracking water, but literally every single food. Now at first, it's going to be a little bit faffy, probably look at an extra 5 to 10 minutes each meal, but over time, that eventually will become 5 to 10 minutes a day, and it'll be much, much easier, especially as you eat similar things more of the time. So that's essentially the first thing you need to do. Start doing that and get tracking food all the time. It doesn't matter if it's not at mealtime, anything you eat, you put into MyFitnessPal. It's worth noting as well, there's no point in lying to it because it's a robot, it's a machine, it doesn't care. And we need the most accurate data so we know where you're at, so we know what changes we can make. If you are eating an extra tub of ice cream a day and not tracking it, then we don't know that, then we can't help. But if we know that you're having a tub of ice cream, for example, that's fine, because then we can factor that in when it's the decision making about what we need to do to increase or decrease or whatnot. Right, so you've been tracking your food and you've got all these numbers on MyFitnessPal now. Now, when we actually want to see the nutrition information, so the protein, carbohydrates, fat, and so on, there's a few different ways we can do it. One really simple way of doing it is if you're on your phone, if you're turn your phone to landscape, it will give you the nutrition, but it's a little bit messy to look at it like that. So instead, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, hit the nutrition button, and then on the top right, it says macros. So that will show you how many grams of protein, how many grams of carbohydrates, and how many grams of fat you've had in the day. And then if you click on nutrients, it will show you that, but then also more detail. So then it'll include things like fiber and different vitamins and minerals and stuff. And then finally, if you click calories, it'll show you the total daily calories. Now, because we care mostly about what your averages are for the week, there is a way you can see that. So if you click on the top where it says day view and change that to week view, it will give you a graph and it'll give you the data over the course of the whole week. Now we've actually got some numbers. What do we do with them? Basically, you need to share those numbers with us so that we can help you to make changes. So you've got your training tracker, which we've got a full video going through that. So if you're not sure how to use it, have a look at that. What I want you to do is set aside 5 to 10 minutes once a week. Do it more often if you want to, but it shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes really. And what you're going to do is take the numbers from each day, the protein, carbohydrates and fat, and put it into your tracker. So then we have an idea of what's going on. You'll also put in your daily weigh-ins, which we'll talk about separately. And then from there, we'll have all the right information so that we can make any changes we need to, and we can treat you a little bit more like a car, and then we know this thing's wrong, we need to change this. This thing's right, we need to keep doing this, and so on. And there's less guesswork involved, and it's a much more accurate process. There's less room for error. If you don't want to put in every single day's nutrition, you can press the week view and just put in the averages from the whole week. It's not as helpful to us, but it's still as helpful because it still gives us some data. Basically, what we're going to get you to do is repeat that for anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks to get a base level of what your nutrition is like. A lot of people find when they start tracking foods, they actually eat a bit healthier and eat a bit better anyway. So sometimes we don't need to make any changes. Sometimes we do. In the times where we do, we'll have to change what your targets are, and I'll talk about that shortly. If you're not someone we're working with for nutrition, but you still want to go through this, you can download our template tracker using one of the links below. Okay, so we now to use MyFitnessPal, we've been tracking food now. Now to eat specifically for your goals, what we need to do is, step 1, we need to look at what your nutrition targets are. So we will give you what your nutrition targets are in your tracker. That might say something, for example, like 200 grams of protein, 300 grams of carbs, and 70 grams of fat. Now, the first step, once you've got these targets, is to basically fill in the protein for the day. So the way that I would do it is I'd be like, right, I eat 3 meals a day, for example, and I need 150 grams of protein. So that's roughly 50 grams of protein in each. So it might be a chicken breast, it might be an omelette, it might be protein shake, something like that. I would put in the protein sources for the day first, then I would add in the rest of the meals. So like, say with your chicken, you might have like a stir fry or something like that. Maybe you add in noodles with it, pop in all of that stuff in your main meals, and then have a look and see how far off your targets you are. If you're over your targets, take off some stuff. Take off the stuff that's the easiest to remove without messing with the meal. So using like the chicken stir fry example, if you make your chicken stir fry all in one pan, veggies and stuff like that, and then you also have noodles separately, it'll be much, much easier to reduce the calories from the noodles because it's not all mixed in. And then in your extras is where I would put single ingredient foods to like finish off your nutrition. So if you're like, right, I've now got 20 grams of protein left, but no grams of carbs, no grams of fat, you could add just 20 grams of protein powder or something like that. Now, there is a more detailed video talking about planning the structure for all of your meals if you click in the presentation, or if not, if you just go on YouTube and type in Adam Sawyer's meal planning examples. Now, if we haven't given you specific targets, there are some targets that you can use on the screen now. To actually make progress, what we need to do is on a daily basis, you need to hit your nutrition targets. Weekly, we then want to make sure the averages are correct. So if you're over a few days and then under a few days, as long as it averages out okay, that's fine, and you're going to work towards whatever the goals are, whether it's gaining or losing. Over time, what we'll do is we'll have a look at how you respond. If your weight is going in the right direction, you're looking better, you're feeling better, whatever it is towards your goals, however we're measuring it, whether it's measurements, body fat, weight, whatnot, and then we'll adjust how many calories you need based on that. So usually we don't tend to need to make many adjustments at first. It's as things go along and progress starts to stall, we might need to change things. So for example, you might start losing weight on 2,500 calories. That might go smoothly for the first 6 weeks, and you might get stuck and your weight might stay there for a while. Just as you've lost weight, your body becomes a bit more efficient. You stop sort of fidgeting and all these movements which burn energy. So we might need to drop it down to 2,300 or something just to keep the fat loss going. Now, we'll talk to you about that more on an individual basis, obviously depending on what specifically it is that you're working towards. So fast forward, we're 6 months, a year, 18 months, however long down the line, you've tracked your food, you have a great idea of what's in different foods. You can look at a plate of food at a restaurant and be like, right, that's roughly 750 calories, it's this many grams of protein, that fits in with what I need for the day. I probably haven't got space for a dessert, or whatever it is. You've either lost your fat or gained the muscle or whatnot. Now, you will have hopefully develop some healthier eating habits, because what you'll find is when you've been tracking food for long enough, you'll start to make inherently better choices almost by accident, because you'll be like, right, I've got 300 calories left to eat today. I can have one chocolate bar, or I can have masses and masses of fruits and veg. And over time, you'll gradually start to eat more fruit, more veg, more lean meats, because it means you get to eat more food, and also we'll figure out the stuff that makes you feel better rather than feeling worse. Like, you want to eat to fuel yourself. So you'll understand the different nutritional content of different foods, and you'll understand exactly how much food you specifically need. Then you'll get to grips with the idea of that nutrition. It's more like a budget. It's not good versus bad food. It's more, you have this amount to spend on these different foods. You choose how you spend them. And then hopefully the point is that you can then use this process to manipulate your body however you need to. If you're like, right, I want to get ready to do a strongman competition, I need to gain weight, you know exactly how to do it. If you're like, you know what, I want to go on holiday and I want to feel a bit leaner, fine, you know exactly how to do it. And it becomes like this tap that you can turn on and off and be like, I want to be a little bit leaner, I want to be a little bit heavier, I want to be whatever it is, and you'll understand your body and the specific nutrition that you need. So once you've done all of this and you're thinking, I don't have to track my food forever, I can understand that, because it would sort of take the enjoyment out of food sometimes. But the point of tracking is so that you can stop tracking over the longer term, as silly as that sounds. I keep saying about it's like the Matrix, eventually you'll see what's in different foods. Once you understand your specific needs, then we can stop tracking. But I think nearly everyone needs to go through a process of tracking their food for a couple of months minimum, maybe even a year, maybe even longer, so you know what's the right amount for you. And what we do once you get to that point where you've got to your goals and you're eating a decent amount of food, you've got a good relationship with food, you're no longer worrying, you're no longer thinking, can I eat that, can't I eat that? Will I be able to fit into the clothes that I want? Because you'll understand exactly how this works, you'll have done it yourself, you'll be confident in it. So the way we generally go about reducing tracking is, instead of tracking 7 days a week, we'll try a period of where you only track 6 days. And then 5 days, and then 4 days, and gradually get rid of the tracking until eventually you no longer need to track your food. You just eat what's best for you, and you maintain your results. And then what you can do is, if you then have a specific goal in mind, you can be like, right, I'm going to get ready for this event. Let's turn the tracking back on. will work towards improving nutrition specifically for this thing. But if not, the long-term plan is to track so that you know what's in food and you know what's the right amount of food for you, and then get to your goals and then stop tracking. So all of this is sort of a bit of an overview of how to use MyFitnessPal. There are going to be some separate, much shorter videos on some more tips and troubleshooting some of the most common errors that we see with people using MyFitnessPal. If you've got any initial questions that are jumping out, leave a comment below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you haven't got any questions, feel free to look through the other videos and they'll get into a bit more detail. We've also got a video of us going through a full day of how we track our food specifically, if you want to have a look at that. And as always, if you need any more help, let us know. Yeah, good luck with the tracking, and hopefully you'll get to grips with it and we'll go from there.